Thank you for joining us for this morning's webinar, Going Deeper with the Quality Self-Assessment Tool, Using Results to Create Lasting Change. This is meant to be a 201 version of information on the Quality Self-Assessment Tool, so I hope everyone has had a chance to use the tool or to view our introductory QSA webinar that is posted on the NYSAN website at nysan.org. I am Allie Leidy. I'm the Policy and Communications Coordinator for New York State After School Network, and I will be presenting this information for you today. I want to give a brief overview of this morning's agenda. First, I will give a very brief description of the New York State After School Network, or NYSAN. Then we will see an overview of the quality improvement process, and we will talk about key people for self-assessment, key implementation strategies, key improvement strategies, key tools, and then I will try to leave plenty of time for questions and answers to get to some specifics for you all as well, based on things that you have seen or done in your own programs using the Quality Self-Assessment Tool. The New York State After School Network is a statewide public-private partnership, and we are dedicated to promoting young people's safety, learning, and healthy development outside of the traditional classroom. We talk about after school very broadly, including structured activities that take place in school and community-based settings, and they might be offered before school, after school, summer, holidays, all different forms. And this tool is applicable to all of those programs and can be modified to be used for those types of programs as well. As I said, we're a public-private partnership. This slide is just an overview of our private partners on our advisory council and our public partners on our steering committee and our regional network affiliates that we have across the state. So first we're going to talk about the quality improvement process. This slide shows the cycle of improvement, and the first part is assessing the program, collecting data about your program, and that's doing the survey of stakeholders using the Quality Self-Assessment Tool. Then, based on that survey, you will create an improvement plan, and that should have specific action steps towards the improvements that you're trying to make. And then implementation of the program plan, so following those steps in your program, and then you're going to reassess the program using the same survey that you've used before to see if you've actually made some improvements or if there are areas that need the improvement plan that need to be readjusted, and that would be the next step, adjusting the improvement plan, and then finally reassessing the program again. And once you get to a point where you've made the improvements you're trying to make, then you're going to assess the program on something else. But it is a continuous cycle of improvement, so that we're constantly looking at the quality of the program and trying to make improvements based on that and keeping up quality in different areas all at the same time. So the information that we're going to talk about today is based on that cycle. And for the quality self-assessment process, there are some key people that need to be involved. The first is a self-assessment leader. The self-assessment leader is the person who's taking charge of the quality self-assessment process. And the first thing they do should be to take the quality self-assessment tool so that they have an idea of everything that's in the elements that you're working on, and where they think quality lies. And it may or may not be at the level that the quality, that the self-assessment leader thinks. However, it's very important to have that baseline understanding of where the program is and what kinds of things stakeholders will be looking at as they're going through the self-assessment process. Then, in collaboration with other staff and stakeholders, the self-assessment leader takes a role in determining who's going to be engaged in the process, so which stakeholders are going to be surveyed and who is going to be part of the team that's responsible for making improvements once you've done the survey and created an improvement plan. They're also going to determine how and when the self-assessment will take place and who will facilitate discussions. And we'll talk about that on the next slide, and how data and findings will be compiled and shared, and that means with the stakeholders. So you want to make sure that when you're surveying and you get information and feedback from people, that you're always reporting back to them later about the improvements that you've made to continue to keep up buy-in that's created as you are getting their feedback, so they feel like everything that they have given to you had value and made a difference. And the self-assessment leader also helps to ensure that the self-assessment process leads to planning and program improvement. And that's really the part that we're talking about today, to be sure that we're really making lasting change in the program and not just implementing the survey and then leaving it at that. For the self-assessment leader, the role is often taken on by site directors, but there are a lot of other people who can take on this role. Anyone that's able to do all of those things that can really be engaged in the process and can take a leadership role in ensuring that all of those steps are taken. The next person is the facilitator, and that's a person who facilitates focus group discussions. This can be the self-assessment leader, sometimes it is. Some programs choose to engage an external facilitator to lead the process and offer a neutral voice in discussions. And that's something you should decide based on several factors. The things to really consider are how open people are going to be in a focus group meeting if the self-assessment leader is the program director and that person is the one also facilitating discussions. So are you going to be getting real feedback that you can use from that kind of discussion from parents, from staff, from students, if that person is the one in charge of the program? And that oftentimes you can, but it's something to really think about before selecting the facilitator. So a facilitator should engage all stakeholders, and in a focus group, they need to create an atmosphere that is safe, comfortable, and empowering. And a good facilitator provides opportunities for everyone to contribute ideas and suggestions in the focus group setting. They actively listen and connect ideas and themes as they emerge, and they're prepared to answer questions about policies and procedures or know where to go to get that information. So if the program director is not in the room and they're the one that knows something, the facilitator can go back, get that information, and bring it back to the focus group for the next meeting. Avoiding personalizing what's shared in the process is also very important, and that's why, again, it's important to think about who the right facilitator is. And they remain non-judgmental and help bring consensus and closure to discussion. So there are a lot of skills involved in that. We have some information on our website and a facilitator toolkit that can be helpful that was created by a different educational entity that might be helpful for facilitators that haven't had as much experience facilitating focus groups or other meetings coming to consensus. But the consensus part is really important when we're talking about getting real data and results for the QSA tool survey part from the focus group, because as we say, the scores for your survey are not going to be an average of what everyone rates an indicator at. You want to be sure that we're really bringing consensus, talking through why people rated things differently, and figuring out where the program really lies in quality. And so coming to consensus on that is very important so that we're making improvements in the right place. Then that's part of the role of the facilitator. Another very important group is the stakeholders, and it's important to consider which stakeholders you're including. That might be youth participants, program staff, parents, guardians, or family members of the youth participants, school administrators, any partner organizations, anyone involved in your program. And stakeholders should be thoughtfully included in each discussion. So you really need to think about what element you're focusing on and what your focus group is going to be talking about, so that your stakeholders make sense and can actually give valuable feedback to that topic. So there are some instances where youth participants might not make as much sense when we're doing administrative pieces, or perhaps you have a youth leadership team that actually would be involved in that. Similarly, parents might not have as much feedback on staff professional development, but they might. So you just need to think about what makes sense in your program and who should be involved in each piece. Another one that's not on this slide is funders, and that's a group that you really want to be thoughtfully including or board members, because those people might have a financial stake in the program. So you want to think about if you want to really be having these open, honest discussions and kind of airing dirty laundry, as they say, with the groups of people that you're working with. However, those can be great people to get good feedback from and have a lot of work done on the improvement side. So again, it's really important to be thoughtful about who is included in this, and that's a big role of the self-assessment leader, is to figure out who's going to make the most sense. There's also key implementation strategies. So once we know who's involved, who's leading the process, facilitating discussions, and who's actually going to be involved in those discussions, we need to implement the quality self-assessment tool. So one thing to consider is the breadth of what you're looking at. And I've put a couple of options on here from what we've heard from programs and seen in the field. So many programs choose to do all 10 elements of the quality self-assessment tool at once. That means they're looking at all aspects of the program all at one time in one survey, and then in one or a couple of focus group meetings. There are some pros to this. It's a good overall view of program quality, and it covers all of your elements very quickly. So it's nice to be able to see across the whole spectrum of your program what you want to be focusing on first. So it's easier to kind of prioritize that way across everything. However, cons are that you don't go as in-depth with each element. There's not going to be time to sit down and focus on every piece in the focus group meeting. And there can be some competing priorities on the action plan when you're looking at that many pieces of your program at once. Another option is doing one element each week or month. A lot of programs choose to do that maybe at a monthly staff and parent meeting or something similar to that. A pro of this is that you get some more focus on each element. You can definitely be a little bit more specific about what you're doing, but a similar con is that there are still competing priorities on your action plan because it will be very difficult to complete an action plan within 1 week or 1 month in many cases. There are going to be steps on your action plan that will take longer to complete, and then your focus will shift to the next element, and you need to be sure to drive the improvement across all of the action plans that are still open and keep up quality where it was. So it's something to think about as you're choosing that. The next option is one element, focusing on one element until improvements are complete. So that means we're going to take one element. For instance, we might take programming and activities, work on that with a focus group and surveying, and then create the action plan, actually work through the entire action plan, and then move on to something else like environment and climate. Pros for this are that you get an in-depth treatment on each element. You're going to be very specific. Focused improvements are going to be made across that element, and participants in the focus group become very familiar with the whole process. So as you move from one element to another, you know exactly how the surveying focus group and then the improvements are made, so that quality improvement cycle that we looked at the beginning is going to be familiar and faster as they move through it multiple times across different elements in a complete process. The con for this is clear. It will take much longer to complete all of the elements to do that. So it's important to think about your options. That's not encompassing all of the options for you, but those are the most common ones that we hear people are using in the field. Also need to think about timing. The beginning of the year for a self-assessment is a great time to, these are all a great time, but for the beginning of the year, thinking about quality self-assessment is helpful because your program has just started. You're really looking at the program across the whole year, and you have time to make your improvements. The middle of the year is helpful because you actually have some experience in the program. The parents will be more familiar most likely with how the program works, and the participants and staff members as well can really draw on their experiences from the first part of the year to answer questions and then make improvements for the second part of the year, and hopefully carry those improvements on to coming years. At the end of the year is also helpful for the same reason. You've done the whole program, and you have feedback from all of that and the experiences that have been gained throughout that process, and then you're able to create improvement plans that can be implemented in the following year. Now, there are some important considerations when you're looking at timing. The improvement process that we looked at before takes a lot of time, so it's important to think about when you're going to be able to work through that process when you're selecting beginning, middle, or end of the year. Staff turnover is also important. If we are doing a whole self-assessment process at the end of the year, and then we have a whole new set of staff that weren't involved in that process, then it's going to take time to create more buy-in and to get those staff members to be implementing pieces of your action plan. So think about if staff are going to be involved in that action plan and the improvement steps, and if your program tends to experience a lot of turnover or not. And also other program commitments and priorities. There can be some things where we know that there are some busy parts of the year when we're doing large events or recruiting, anything like that. So it's important to think about that so that you have enough time to actually commit yourself to the self-assessment process. Now, another thing that we're doing in implementation is surveying stakeholders, so I wanted to do a brief overview of the different ways you can do that. We do have the paper quality self-assessment tool that's available in many, many languages on our website. You can download that, and I'm going to show you our website very briefly at the end as well. And so that's just a chart, and they're going to fill in their responses and return them. We also have quality self-assessment survey spreadsheets on our website. There is a spreadsheet that the facilitator can send out to all participants. It includes each of the performance levels for all of the indicators on all of the elements, and they can input their information. And then there's a separate compilation spreadsheet for viewing results. And I'm going to show a little bit of this as well. But that spreadsheet is helpful because it actually can graph the different responses and help select where your focus might be. And then a lot of programs do modified versions for youth. They might get responses from a group discussion or like a small focus group of youth, or they might do sheets with similar questions that just have, sometimes they have a happy face and sad face and middle face selection for youth feedback. You have to think about the age levels of youth that you're working with when you're getting feedback. And also, when you're getting feedback from youth, again, think about which elements you're including youth voice on, what makes sense to get their feedback on and not. Often, environment, we certainly want to hear from the participants, programming and activities, relationships, those are some key ones, and participant engagement as well. So think about that as you're looking at how you're going to survey youth in your program. So once we have done our surveying, we've collected our information, the next part to come to that consensus, again, is that focus group that's going to be facilitated by the facilitator. There are a couple of different options for hosting focus groups that we've seen work well. One of them is a collective focus group session. This generally includes a representative from each stakeholder group. So you're going to have one or more parents involved that are going to represent the parent group, students, staff members, school leaders. There'll be representatives from each of them. You really want to think about the size of the group, though. It's great if you can keep those groups to about 8 to 10 people and just have 1 or 2 representatives from each of your stakeholder groups for that. Otherwise, if you're having 100 people in the room, it's going to be very difficult to come to consensus and have everyone's voice heard. For these, the facilitator is going to lead the discussion. and it can include multiple sessions. So there might be a group discussion of the QSA survey results first. So everyone takes the survey, and their respective stakeholder groups take the survey. So the parent that's involved might take it, but also many other parents will take it. And you'll look at the results from that survey and then have that discussion in the first meeting. Then maybe in your second meeting or at the end of your first meeting, you're going to come to consensus on program quality based on those survey results, just on the element or elements that you're focusing on. And then maybe in the next one, your group would collectively create the action plan for improvement so that there's buy-in from everyone on the steps moving forward. So think about how many sessions you need, and then also consider the timing of that, especially if you're trying to reach both staff members that work the hours of your program but also have to be there with staff or with the participants, and also for parents who might not be able to come during program hours or in the middle of the day. So timing is important. Also, food is a great way to get people there, and if you're going to have parents, you need to think about childcare for them for each session to accommodate all of the members of your focus group. So maybe you have some staff members that are doing some activities with the kids while the parents are participating in the focus group. But for each of these focus group different types that I'm going to talk about, those things are all important considerations for all of them, especially when you're trying to incorporate parents. The next one is small focus group sessions. Generally, this is one session with each type of stakeholder. So you're going to have one focus group just with parents, one focus group just with youth, one just with program staff, one just with school staff, any of those stakeholder groups. So you do one per stakeholder group. The facilitator would attend all of the meetings and compile the results and bring them back to the self-assessment leader and the implementation group. And I didn't talk about that earlier, but in this case, you're going to still need a group of people that will be responsible for implementing your action plan, and that would be the implementation group. So anyone that's going to have responsibility for making improvements needs to be involved when we're deciding on the improvement plan. So the facilitator, again, will bring results back from everyone and help that self-assessment leader and implementation group come to consensus. So for these, it's important to consider who should be in the room for an honest discussion. As I mentioned when we're talking about choosing a facilitator, again, think about if the parents will be honest with whoever is going to be facilitating, or if the youth will be honest. Maybe there's more than one facilitator, and program staff might facilitate the conversation with youth, but someone else would facilitate the conversation with parents. As long as all that information can be brought back to that same assessment leader and implementation group, then that's an okay way to get feedback from everyone. And this is good for more contentious issues. Maybe you think there's going to be some disagreement between program staff and parents, and you don't want to have them in the same room trying to decide what the actual quality is, what the problem is, and what the improvement should be. Then you want to separate out those groups. A con of this is it doesn't create as much of a collective voice, but you can use this first, have the small groups meet first, and then get representatives from that for the large focus group session like we just discussed previously. And so then you can create a little bit more of a collective voice that way. But it's also important to remember to report back to stakeholders. In this case, in particular, it might be easy to say, oh, that was a one-off session, and forget to go back to the parents and say what improvements were made. But as we talked about earlier, it's important to be sure that they know that their voice was heard and that they were important in the improvements and that they know what improvements were made. And I just want to mention, as we're talking about this, that it really is important to include these stakeholders in the self-assessment process, because it creates that collective voice, but it also creates buy-in for improvements in the program, and it makes them feel a little bit more ownership of the program, and it will help in the long run. And as saying that, the next option that we sometimes see is internal focus group sessions. And this might only include program staff, administrators, or board members. It can include survey results from stakeholder groups. So you might get the paper surveys from parents and from youth, but maybe you're not having those focus group sessions with them. And then staff would review the QSA results, come to consensus themselves, and create the action plan for improvement. And this can include more than one staff facilitator. And a pro of this is it's much easier to time sessions when you're working just with internal members. And there are a few ways we've heard that this is done. One is in a retreat or a full-day session where everyone works through the element or elements together and spends the whole day coming to consensus and then creating the improvement plan. It's also done sometimes in a series of weekly or monthly meetings. And in that, we've heard that some programs use this as an opportunity for professional development for staff, where more than one staff member would facilitate. So each week, a different staff member might take a different element or a different portion of the discussion and get to lead that session. The con for this is that it doesn't create as much of a collective voice at all because of what was just mentioned, and that is that we're not getting as much of the buy-in and the feeling of ownership of the program and the program quality and the results from the other stakeholder groups like parents, participants, and or school staff. So it's important to think about that if you're selecting this model, how you're going to get that buy-in from the other groups, be that through the paper surveys and then reporting back, or maybe sometimes programs will do presentations at parent group meetings, and it's not necessarily the same as a focus group, but they're still involving parents in the improvement. So it's, again, very important to think about how you're going to create buy-in if you're only doing this in an internal way. So the next step, and one that has been mentioned, is the development of an action plan. And this is really where your improvement strategies lie. And it's a very important part of the quality self-assessment process to ensure that you're going to create some lasting change in the program. Please do not stop at just surveying participants and doing a focus group to come to consensus. You have got to create an action plan to be able to actually make the improvements. This is a photo of the action plan that we include on our website as a template. It also comes when you download it with sample that's filled in. And it includes the information you might put during your focus group meeting where you're coming to consensus and creating this plan. So you'd put in your organization or your site, the date, who was involved, that's the attendees, and then the program element that you're working on, environment and climate, programming activities, that kind of thing, which indicator you're working on, what performance level the group came to consensus on. So did the group decide we're currently at a 2 on this indicator, and then we're working towards a 3. Then we're going to say what our improvement steps and strategies are. And that's going to be each piece, and you can use several lines for what needs to happen. And then, very important, is the person responsible. And everyone that's listed as a person responsible for making improvements hopefully is involved in that implementation group. And if they're not, we need to bring them in and talk to them about what we looked at the focus group and look at the survey results so that we can create some buy-in with them too, because they're going to be the ones responsible. You don't want to have a staff member responsible for implementing changes in their day-to-day activities that doesn't understand why. And so that person responsible, again, is very important, and that should be a name. And then timeline for improvement is when is it due, and that should be specific, whether that is a week from the day or a month. And I would, if you're coming up with things where you're writing the timeline for improvement is due 3 months from now, I would break that into smaller steps, because that is a long-term goal. So look at your short-term goals too. You want to be sure that there's something, that you're doing within the week or the month to create improvement, just to keep that on the radar and working. And things that will take 3 months need to have some steps, unless it's like a one-off thing that has to happen 3 months from then, and there were other pieces leading up to that in your action plan. The resources needed is also important, and that can be physical resources. Maybe you need more supplies. Maybe you need more space for the program. It can also be things such as professional development for staff. So that's your action plan, and the self-assessment leader should be the one responsible, or at least delegate responsibility for checking in with the responsible people at each deadline that's on the timeline for improvement to be sure that these are kept up with. When we're writing goals on here, on the implementation strategies, I recommend SMART goals, and there's a template on our website for this. SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, results-focused, and time-bound, and these are the easiest easiest way to make goals that you are sure you can achieve and measure the improvements on. So here you have an example where option A, it says the goal is to offer more project-based activities that promote creativity, and this is based on the element programming and activities, one of the indicators there. So, okay, offering more project-based activities that promote creativity makes sense. That is an improvement step, but it's not very specific. It's hard to measure whether we're doing that or not, and decide if it's been done, because there's not a time piece on there. So for option B, it says to promote participant creativity by offering at least 2 project-based activities per club per semester by January 1st. So that's an example where it's focused on results. We want to promote participant creativity, and we're going to do that in a specific way. We're going to offer at least 2 project-based activities per club per semester and time-bound by January 1st. So that's a way that you might write each of the steps. So as you're creating your action plan, it's also important to prioritize each of the steps. So what relates to safety? Those are the things you really want to think about doing first. If there's something on there that's directly related to safety of participants, really want to prioritize that. Also think about how the piece that you are trying to improve relates to your mission. Hopefully everything that you're working on relates back to your mission in some way, and if it doesn't, maybe it's not as important to prioritize right now. What will impact quality the most, especially what will impact quality on the ground for participants? Those are things where you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck, they might say, and have a lot of impact for the work that you're doing. How long will it take? So you might want to have some different long-term and short-term goals so that you're working on pieces that have a range of different lengths, so that you have something you can work on this week, and then maybe there's something you're working on that's going to make a change months from now. And what you want to be careful of is that you don't have 15 things that need to be done this week, or 15 things that are going to take 3 months to work on, because that's going to be a little harder. So try to vary it up. Who needs to work on this? That's similar to the length. So if you're writing down the same person's name for every step, and we see this sometimes where the program director's name is just written on every step, then that's going to be very difficult for that person to actually do it. So try to vary who's going to be working on it, and think about steps that various different staff members or other stakeholders can work on at the same time, so that more is being done, but no one is taking on too much of it. Also, does something else need to be done or decided before we can do this? That is important to think about. So if this step that you are working on actually means that you need to have purchased maybe something beforehand, or you need to have talked to somebody else and taken another improvement strategy first, then we need to put that on our action plan, not the piece that is based on it. That might be lower on the list. Okay, so those are some ways to think about prioritizing, but you all know your programs best, so think about those, but also think about what's the most important to you all as you're going through and prioritizing for your action plan. Creating accountability is also an important implementation piece. Planning collaboratively with all who will be responsible for completing tasks, I cannot emphasize enough. As I said, anyone whose name is going to be on your action plan really needs to be involved in the process of creating that action plan so that they have the buy-in. Break down each action point into a SMART goal. Again, that's how you're going to be sure that it's specific and that you can go back and look at the progress that you've made. Assign all tasks to the appropriate person. If we are assigning some large change to someone that doesn't have the authority to do that, it's not going to get done. So really be specific there in terms of who can actually get this done. Create specific deadlines and check-in points. Again, that's that timeline for improvement, and make sure that that self-assessment leader is checking in there with the person responsible to be sure that it was done. Assign a facilitator or leader to oversee improvements and check-ins. So those key people are very important. And again, report the results back to stakeholders. Be sure that they know what's been done in the program. So those are some great strategies. So we're going to look now at key improvement strategies. And there are some common improvement strategies that we see most often. That's professional development for staff, and we're going to talk about that more specifically. Sometimes it's new or updated curriculum or a new or updated schedule for the program when we're looking at programming and activities or relationships, or looking at some tweaks to those pieces of the program. Sometimes it's new or updated organizational documents. You might need to create staff handbook or parent handbook. There are other pieces there that might need to be made, or new or updated organizational policies. Maybe you need a new attendance policy, something like that, for example. So those are some common pieces. I'm going to talk a little bit more about professional development. So for staff members, programs should know the staff skill set. What are they really good at? What aren't they as good at? And what other skills do they need? And so I want to show you a resource that we have on our website. It's the Partnership for After School Education, or PACE, is Professional Development Planning Tool. And this is what it looks like. It's a great piece because you can list each staff member, what their job is and what their responsibilities are, what skills and knowledge they're required to have to do that job, and then of those, what do they already have? What are their strengths? And then what are their needs? And we can really think about fulfilling the needs there and different ways of doing that. And you can look across your whole set of staff. If everyone has similar needs, perhaps you want to do a joint professional development piece. However, if only one person needs it, then we're going to look at something more specific for that one person and save the resources and the training for something else. You can also take a look at this sheet and say, okay, staff member A is really good at one piece, is really good at creating a strong relationship with youth, and staff member B is working on that. Maybe staff member A would be a great person to help them with that first before we work on something else. So it's just a good way to get an overview of your program and an excellent tool to use. And again, that's available on our website. And so when we're looking at that fulfilling the needs section, there are various types of professional development that you can do. One of those that's great is coaching, especially if you have someone that really knows what they're doing. Coaching includes a lot of the pieces that are listed under it here, and it's working kind of one-on-one with a staff member about the pieces that they are in need of improvement in, and it can include program observation and feedback. So they're going to observe the staff member and in the situation that they're in, and then offer some feedback, some constructive feedback in terms of how they can make some improvements. Modeling is another piece where, again, as we said, if there's a staff member or a supervisor that's good at something, then they can show the staff member how to do that by modeling. Staff meetings are also a great place for professional development. You can fit in little tips and tricks for staff members. You can fit in trainings. That's more for the group sessions again. Trainings, again, separate trainings might be something where you're either bringing them in-house or sending out specific staff members to trainings that are existing. And conferences are a great way to get a whole lot of professional development and take a look at what's going to be offered and what the focus of the conference is, and then make those selections for your staff in conjunction with your staff. It's very helpful if staff members can be involved in creating their professional development plan so they have more buy-in, again. Peer mentoring, so again, that's staff members working together to help each other in pieces. Networking events is a great way for staff members to meet other staff members in different programs in similar positions or in different sites in the same program, and they can then create relationships and get tips from each other. Higher education courses are also another place where you can get great professional development, especially if staff members are working towards another degree. And as you're looking at trainings and conferences, www.afterschoolpathfinder.org is a free resource that is for after school and youth work. It includes training postings across New York State, as well as a listing of trainers, and it also has job postings. So I would recommend taking a look there when you're looking for training and posting your trainings there if they're open to others. So the next key piece is reassessing and adjusting your improvement plans, and that is part of that quality improvement process cycle. So reassessing your program after you have implemented the action plan is very important. You need to see if improvements have been made and what else needs to be addressed. And once you've done that, it's important to then adjust your action plan, do it on paper, not in your head, make sure that you actually have documentation, and do that in a way that will ensure that improvements are made in each of the areas that are in need. So anything that you've realized, maybe we need some more resources here, maybe this plan wasn't making sense, something else came up and there's been changes, we need to readdress that in a different way. Okay, so here are just some overall improvement tips. As we've mentioned many times, create buy-in with all of the stakeholders, especially those that are implementing improvements. I won't stay on that anymore because we've talked about it. The next one is be flexible. Improvements don't always take the form that you would expect. Sometimes changes need to be made to longstanding program practices. As I mentioned, often programs are looking at changes to schedules or curriculum, and it might be easier to say that you want to stick with what you've been doing and make changes in other areas, but be realistic about what is affecting program quality in the area that you're looking at, and be flexible about looking at making some of those changes. And don't take it personally. The work here is to create program quality improvement. It's not to judge a program or you, or the self-assessment leader, program director, anything like that, as good or bad. It's just saying this is where quality is and how do we improve that for the youth that we're working with. And so it's really worth taking the time and effort to do it and making those updates, because you will see the difference in your program. So there are some key tools that you can use as you're working on this quality self-assessment process. One of those is our website. The link here is specifically to the quality self-assessment tool section. And this section includes links to program quality resources and detailed definitions of each of the performance levels. As I mentioned, you can also download our user's guide that includes all of the survey tools, and you can do that as a PDF. And again, it's available in multiple languages. So I just want to show you a couple of screenshots of the website so that you have an idea. So this is the first page in the quality improvement process. Underneath at the top, you can see that there's a webinar available there. That's the 101 webinar if you haven't had a chance to see that yet. And a link to this recording will be available as well. So this one goes over the whole quality improvement process step by step and has links to other pages with resources for each of those steps in the process. So this is a great place to start when you're just getting started with the quality self-assessment tool. This page is an example of what one of the elements looks like. It's programming and activities. It gives you an overview at the top of the page of what the element is, and then it includes indicators and performance levels. And you can expand. You can click on each of the indicators to expand and see the performance levels. And then also, you can download the list of all of the indicators and performance levels as a full PDF if you want to print that out. And so there's a link on every element where you can do that. Each of the elements also has a section for taking action, suggested stakeholders, try this, and tips for success. It's just, this is just an example of what's on there, but those are all helpful pieces as you are going through this process. And then there's also a section for research, tools and templates, and resources. And so these are links to other websites and downloadable pieces and tools that will be helpful as you're going through the process. So I strongly recommend going to the site and seeing what's up and posted there, because it's been updated and we'll continue to update resources there. If you have something that you think would be helpful that's not up there, then please feel free to email me, and I'm going to have my information at the end of this webinar. I just want to touch on performance levels, because this is actually a tool to use, even though it is part of the QSA tool. So again, the performance levels are 1, which is the standard not met, 2, which is approaching the standard, 3, which is meet standard, and is actually the goal that we expect programs to strive for, and then 4, which is excellent or exceeding standards. And if you download those PDFs that show all of them, then you can take a look and say, okay, we're rating our program at a level 2, but we really want to work to make improvements. Just reading the description of what a program might look like at a level 3 or a level 4 is a great way to think about what some improvement strategies will be, because you will see the clear pieces that are different from where the level 2 is. So I recommend doing that as you're creating your plans as well. Another tool is what we mentioned before, the survey and compilation spreadsheets. And this is an example of what one looks like. It looks very similar to the paper copy, but it has a link where you can view all of the definitions for each of them. And again, it's helpful for the compilation spreadsheet. So the first one that we just saw the photo of is the QSA survey to rate the program, and then also that compilation spreadsheet that allows you, the facilitator, to collect responses and view ratings with charts by each element, indicator, and type of respondent. So you can look at the data in many different ways. Then there are also supplements to the tool. There's one in global learning, one in STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and math, one in college and career readiness, one in summer learning, and one in chronic absence. And those are all available on our website. They're very similar to the QSA tool and can be helpful if you're looking at other sections of your program. So now I want to take some time to answer some questions. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen, and I will get to those as quickly as possible. All right, the first question. This webinar will be available, as we mentioned, it is being recorded, and we will post it as soon as possible on our website. So all of this will be available in the future. And so that you know, to get webinars, this one will be posted on the QSA section. However, if you go to our website, which is www.nisan.org, and click on Program Providers and then Professional Development, there is a whole page of webinars that we have done. Okay, so again, please type questions into the box, especially if you have any questions, if you want some specifics on your program too. Okay. Okay, so what do you do when there are some differing opinions between some managers on where the program is actually located on the program quality scale? So, for instance, a site director and a program manager might have a different opinion. That's a great question. I think that is part of what comes up in the focus group. We often see cases where there's a lot of difference of opinion in terms of where the quality actually is. Sometimes it's a difference in knowledge of what's actually happening in the program, and so that'll come up. And a facilitator for that discussion can be really helpful to kind of take ego out of the way and help everyone voice their opinion and talk about why they think it's at that level. So generally speaking, there is one level of quality that makes more sense for the program and where it actually lies. So I would say having that discussion, why do you think that it's rated at a 2? What in the performance level description resonates for your program? What makes sense for that level 2 or that level 3? What is it that the program is doing or isn't doing that makes you think that it's at that level? And comparing and contrasting those. So being really specific about pieces takes it out. That's why those performance levels are so helpful, because it's not just guessing in terms of where the what a 2 could be or what a 3 could be. It's actually looking at those specific examples. So I would say, again, bring in more opinions too. The focus group, again, should include all the stakeholders. The facilitator can be helpful in really being specific about what's going on in the program can be helpful. All right. We have a question about completing the QSA twice each year and if it is adequate. And I believe that is for funding. Those of you that have 21st Century grants or Advantage grants might be required by your funder to do that, to use the quality self-assessment tool. I would say 2 things on that. In terms of compliance for your grant, please talk to your grant manager about that. However, going through and surveying on your program across all 10 elements and then putting the survey away is not a way to create lasting improvement in your program. So I really hope that you will go through this whole process to make the most of the work that you're doing. Do the focus groups, create the action plan, and really implement those changes in your program so that you actually see quality improve. I hope I know that some programs it's very difficult to find the time and you'll run through just doing the survey quickly, but I can't emphasize enough how important it is to actually do all of the steps to create the program improvements that you want. Okay, that's a great question here. How can the program manager and the site director use this tool together to get on the same page? This is a great way to create communication between all stakeholders. So having those focus group discussions about quality is, again, a great way to improve on communication because you're being specific. So I think, again, having a facilitator is helpful. However, if you don't have a facilitator and it's just the program manager and site director looking at the tool together, which, again, you need to think about that internal piece and the pros and cons of just doing internal work. You can use this tool to get on the same page. Most of these pieces are things you can observe in your program. So I would recommend that if they're going to do that, they're going to pick one element, print out the survey, print out the performance levels, walk around the program together and observe and try to see what they can see. Now, some of these are less observable than others. Something like measuring outcomes. You need to look at some data there. But things that are observable in the program, again, it's a great way to walk around together, talk about what you're seeing, what you're not seeing, and they can talk about the fact that maybe it looks different on a different day. That happens. Program quality varies. Things that you're seeing vary. But we want to say on average what we're getting. And if we're not getting a level 3 on the day that we're observing or a level 4, if we're not getting that, then why is that not happening on that day? These things need to be consistent to be at a high level of quality for the most part. So they can talk about what the difference is, what was needed that day, what's different. if there are some differences there in opinion in terms of what's happening at the current time and at a previous time. So that would be a good way to do it. That can also be facilitated where maybe you have an outside person come in and observe too with them, and then have a discussion, sit down in a room and talk about what you observed afterwards. So those observations are a great way to get on the same page. Okay. Okay, and there's a great suggestion here on that same question for both the program manager and site director to do this together, to take one of the surveys and then facilitate a conversation. And I assume that means with other stakeholders, and I think that is another great way to do that, so that they can take ownership and, again, further communication. Okay. All right. If you have any more questions, please put them in. However, I just want to point out that this is my email address. It's ALIDIENYSAN.org on your screen. Please feel free to email me with questions. And I'm going to pull up another slide, but again, you can ask more questions. So we are going to be doing focus groups about QSA experience, and it's not going to be most likely in-person focus groups like the one we just talked about. They'll most likely be virtual. However, if you are interested in participating in a focus group to share your experiences in using the QSA tool, then we would love to have you. Information from this will be used most likely on our website. We would like to create a section in terms of having some stories from the field about how it's been used, what's been successful, and some tips from actual QSA users. And we'll actually use that information in future QSA presentations, and we're hoping to do a webinar that's more of a 301 version with some of the people from our focus group to talk about on-the-ground experience more in-depth and more specific. The second option here is a focus group on our new website. We have added a bunch of new information, and that information we've tried to format in a user-friendly way, and we would love to get feedback from you all as you're using it to find out what other improvements can be made and what else you need on that website. So if you're interested in doing that, please copy down the link that's posted, and it's also in the chat box on the side, so you can click and go there now. It's a quick sign-up sheet. It's just gauging interest, and it will take down your name and your email address and put you on the list to get more information when we actually get those focus groups going in the next couple of months. So I would love it if you guys could do that if you're interested. Okay, and we are just about at time, so I want to thank you all so much for participating in the webinar today and for your excellent questions. And again, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website, and please feel free to reach out. I'm going to leave you all with my contact information again so that you can contact me if you have any questions. Thank you so much.